Good evening and welcome to another episode of Apolitically Incorrect Guyana. My name is Kian Jabour and I'm with my good mood co-host today, Mr. Timothy Jonas. We have some interesting topics today, but I'm actually going to start up on a very light note. Even though it is still complaining, I'm sorry, I'm going to complain about it. The rain has been pouring like crazy over the past couple of days, and this town is still flooding. How can this system not have been fixed by now? We have all the money in the world. How is this not one of the main priorities? Traffic can't even flow properly because of how flooded the place is. What is going on, Tim?
And we're below sea level and we're not focusing on flooding.
Oh my gosh.
It's something else.
It's
we're building roads and we're building bridges, and I think we might have to buy a boat for everybody soon.
Oh, one household, one boat per household. I like it. That was a good one. Nonetheless, we're pleading, we are begging the authorities. You have lots and lots and lots of money, okay? Public infrastructure, sea defense. I know you don't like giving city council money, so do it yourself. Please fix the flooding going on in the city, okay? It's ridiculous now. People have to live. It's unsanitary. It's funny. I actually going to make a comment on that. My father is a doctor. He said every rainy season, you see a surge in illnesses with children, like typhoid, like, waterborne diseases. And he said because of the sewage that comes up, that children have to walk to school in. Because when you're in a marketplace and the marketplace floods, the nasty water splashing up goes onto the fruits and vegetables, blah, blah, blah. It's just an interesting...
You do see that diarrhea, skin conditions,
yes,
skin infections, that kind of thing. You see more of it.
All of it, ear infections, eye infections,
yes.
Everything.
Yeah.
No, it's nasty. Fix it. It's really a basic, human need to at least live in a sanitary condition.
The thing is that the drainage system used to work, so it's not as if we gotta invent the wheel. All we gotta do is maintain what was left behind by the colonials.
Yes.
And I don't know why that's difficult.
I'm going to make a comment on that too, actually. So I'm currently doing construction right now. And where I'm doing construction, when I got there, every time it rained, it was big flooding going on. So the first thing I did is we fixed the gutter in front of the property. Today, over the whole weekend that's been raining, since we fixed that gutter, it has not been flooding.
What you found happening, right, is that because there's no enforcement of the building codes, and this goes back to corruption, we forget that the highest point on the road is supposed to be the middle of the road. Right. And the road goes down, it slopes down to the corner. And if the parapet is higher than the road,
yes,
the water has nowhere to go. And we see people raising their parapet, trying to make islands of their own property.
Fight for self kind of story.
Not realizing that they're making it worse for themselves as well. So you have the high parapet, they cap the drain instead of finding where the original drain was and keeping the original drain intact. And therefore you have stagnant water rather than water flowing. And that problem exists all over the place. Yeah. And unless we can realize that we got to restore our drainage, the people who are blocking the drains, who are squatting and trying to take up half of the area where the drain used to be, we got to push them back. We got to understand that the wards in the city were originally designed to be independently drained. And all of those big drains we see going east to west out to the Mara River, they need to be intact. They need to be maintained, and those wards need to be separately maintained for drainage. Yeah. If you build a road on soppy land that is going to flood, you'll end up with what we see in town, which is the water seeping up, the water table rising, and
they get sinkholes and all of them crumbling on it from underneath.
Drains are more important than anything else. But the thing is, it doesn't catch the eye. Yeah. When the government spending money, or main city council spending money on drains, you almost don't notice it because it's not. Here's my road. It's not grand.
Patchwork. It's nonsense. But with that said, But Tim, when it comes to people realizing, I don't like this side. I don't particularly agree with it. At this point in time, again, if anyone is doing construction right now, what is your choice other than to build your island? If I just leave it below road height for a problem that's already occurring, let's say all the other people have already built, I can't now decide, well, I'm going to do the right thing and build low and build below, the center of the road or whatever. Because if I don't build my land up, I will be the one in the middle flooding.
Except the parapet doesn't belong to you.
Right.
And the road runs from the parapet into the drain, which doesn't belong to you. So none of that people should be interfering with.
People should be interfering.
And when they do, they are breaching the building codes. And it needs to be firmly stopped, so that block by block, Mayor and City Council needs to be going, grading their parapets, having their parapets flow smoothly into the drains, and ensuring the drains are clean, and that there's no concrete capping of the drains, which happens these days.
I got a good one for you though. Okay, just to show you how this problem, I don't know if it's building code, I don't know if it's something they've just decided to skip on, but I'm going to show you something very interesting. So quite a few of my friends and family, I'm sure like everybody in the country, are building in these new housing schemes. Okay, the young professionals, LBI, wherever they're building, right in the back, behind you, well, behind where you thing. So what I found interesting about it is everyone has now again reverted back to the same idea of fight for self. Why though? Because what has happened is, there for a reason I can't explain, there has been no conscious effort to ensure a uniformed drainage system. So everybody in front of their own personal houses are building whatever drains they feel like, whatever depth they feel like, whatever width they feel like. And sometimes to the point where, depending on how the land is laid out, it'll be a straight line, 1, 2, 3, 4 houses. And then this house, maybe a corner lot or something, might be offset a little bit. And then all of a sudden you come to this block. Like the drain is no longer flowing and it has to go around and go through. And again, you are responsible in these housing schemes for building your drain. The government not building it with the roads. So if every man is left to fix his own drain, again, without giving any stipulations, we ended up back in square one and all these new housing schemes would flooded.
Well, it's funny you say that, because that solution, again, is simple. If you go to the cemetery, the tombs that are laid there are built to specification, right? So you have to use a certain amount of cement. It's got to be a certain height, a certain width. If you standardize and impose specifications for the drains to be built, so the walls of the drains have to be a specific thickness, you can't use solid block, you do a solid cast, a specific depth, and you insist that as part of the building plan, and here's another problem, because most of those people don't have building plans. Right. And of course, if you're putting up a house, you should have submitted a building plan to the NDC for approval beforehand.
Yes.
It would be a simple thing for part of that approval to be an approval of the location of the drain and specifications as to how the drain is to be built. So the thickness of the walls, the depth of the drain, the material you make of the drain. Yeah. Because the truth is that part of the housing schemes that are going up, so much is happening that very often you see that the drainage and the roads and the posts and all that kind of thing are not done quickly enough, or not done properly. So if you want to make that the responsibility of the landowner to do the drains adjacent to where he is, the small drains leading into the larger drains, fine. But give him the specifications so that you know where the drain is going to be. Yeah. So when you stand up at one end of the road and you look up at the drain, you see a straight line drain looking the same, knowing that water will run smoothly in that drain. It's kind of simple, but it's not.
I'm going even simpler for you. And again, funny enough, this is my little bit of schooling that is taking place here. Coming from having experienced and learned, I did engineering in school. And one of the things, for example, in the Canadian city system, which I found, now they're talking about it, just kind of clicked and came back to me. It is why the government builds the sidewalks. Yeah. Because they're now responsible for building the drains under the sidewalks, which is why you see all the storm drains go under the sidewalks. So they uniform, when they build a housing scheme, they build the sidewalks with the drainage underneath uniformed throughout the entire area.
No, you will have noticed that, especially on the East Coast, but you're seeing it on the highways in Guyana, that they're following that model. So that they're building drains on either side of the highway, or on one side of the highway, and they're capping the drains. It's happening on Caripesta Avenue with blocks, these slabs, concrete slabs, that apparently are intended to be sidewalks. The end result is disastrous because it's unsightly, first of all. So the aesthetics is horrible. They don't fit properly, so that if you're not careful, you're going to trip and fall in. But if you go up to some places like Sparendam, for example, you see that the slabs have actually fallen into the gutter.
Yes.
So that now you just have if you walk in there
in the night and you gone in a hole, it's like a manhole.
So, we award in contracts and we talk about how contracts are awarded, but there doesn't seem to be any engineering supervision in terms of the specifications.
Just city planning.
Monitoring how it is done. And the period afterwards to ensure that it lasts.
Yeah.
and that you're fixing problems as they
Yeah.
arise. There doesn't seem to be any.
I read a comment here and they're saying, stop blaming the government for everything, blame City Hall. And I sit in here going, but you have to understand that it is a joint problem.
Well, I don't agree with you on that.
Go ahead.
People say stop blaming the government, blame City Hall. So let's talk about Georgetown.
Good.
Georgetown City Hall makes its money from rates and taxes. The legislation contemplates that every 5 years, the chief valuation officer goes around and values everything. So he values all the properties, and then you pay rates and taxes based on a percentage of that value. The chief valuation officer is an agency of the government. The government has not instructed the chief valuation officer to value properties since 1996.
Okay.
Now, every 5 years, 1996. Now, I want you to think about property values in 96
Versus
when it
now.
was only wood buildings and little shops and that kind of thing, as opposed
No
to
oil.
now.
Yeah.
Property values have gone up by 50 times in that period. But City Hall is still receiving rates and taxes at the 1996 level. So you've got properties there worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and people paying rates and taxes on those properties at $50,000, $40,000 a year.
Yeah.
You want to blame City Hall for not having enough money? I am not defending City Hall. City Hall is a center of corruption. But let's start with being fair. Put the money in their hands by giving them the opportunity to make the money fairly through fair rates and taxes that are commensurate with the value of the buildings that they are supposed to be looking after, so that they can do their job.
Yes.
Their job isn't just to deal with rubbish, keep parapets clean. It's also to maintain roads, to maintain the drains, to supervise everything that's going on, to provide city police.
Yeah.
They can't do that on 1996 valuations.
Yeah.
So when you hear that government says City Hall not doing their work, they're right. City Hall is corrupt. But City Hall also is not doing their work because they don't have the wherewithal to do it.
And they're underfunded. They don't have the money. Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, just again to go back to the government, it's also understand that these new schemes that are not falling under the design or any such management of City Hall are ending up back into the same problems. We're watching the problem repeat itself.
Well, it's repeating itself. You're right, because in each of those areas where you got a new scheme, there's an NDC, and the NDC is the entity that is supposed to be collecting rates and taxes.
Yeah.
But so many of those new schemes have not been brought under the umbrella.
Yeah.
So they don't pay any rates and taxes. And yet the NDC should be and is expected to provide garbage disposal, maintenance, parapet maintenance for a bigger area at a greater expense without more revenue at 1996 values for those people who are paying. Now, here's the thing.
Good.
I am a strong advocate, and you hear me talking about it all the time, of decentralization of power. If power is decentralized so that those agencies, the main city hall in Georgetown, in New Amsterdam, in Linden, the NDCs in all of those areas, are empowered by reasonable rates and taxes that they can pay. Think about those huge schemes that are going up, N-more LBI. If the NDCs there were able to get rates and taxes from those properties, echoes, they would have the money that they could build their own roads, maintain their own drains, and they are more directly answerable to the people who live there, because it's easy for those people to face to face with the NDC chairman, with the NDC councillors, and say, I don't like what you're doing, I'm voting you out, and they'll be more invested if they are paying rates and taxes. Right now, when you're not paying anything, or when you're ducking and hiding and not paying anything, it's really hard to justifiably say, I'm not happy that my garbage isn't being collected. But I can tell you, for me, where I live, a private garbage collection comes around because the NDC doesn't provide garbage collection. And the amount of money that I pay to that private garbage collection is as much as I pay in rates and taxes.
Yeah. I think people need to understand that the system, to understand that it's both sides. Again, as Tim said, we're not defending city council in any means, but understand that if you cast blame on one, you have to understand where the system is flawed. And just to throw, again, I don't think you hammered it home enough. The solution to the problem, and I want to make this clear because a lot of people, again, just think we hear hammering or bad talking or complaining. The solution to the problem is depoliticizing and decentralizing all of this. All right. That's where the issue. How this is then resolved is when you empower the NDCs, ensure that they have certain amounts of money that can sustain those areas. And then again, through local government elections, those NDCs, which are properly equipped, are then more answerable to the people. What you're going to find is they will be forced to act. Because
But instead, what you see is you see the government going into a village, some little sideline dam or something, building a concrete strip and calling it a road, and saying kudos to the government, thank you
Yes.
for building a road, where the NDC should have been maintaining and should have the autonomy and the power to build its own road
Right.
and meet the needs of the people who were there. Politics is trumping real needs in Guyana
Good.
every single time.
Good. And the main tool that they control with is funding, is controlling the money.
Control the money.
So they can actually have a detachment. They'll set up a board. They'll tell you, oh, these people are independent, etc., etc. We watch it all the time across. No, these people are doing their own thing. For example, the police, right? But understand where the money comes from. So if they are controlling the money, even that independent organization, one, cannot do their job properly, and are two, answerable to those that are giving them the money, the politicians. It's really simple to understand. All right. And I think everybody, just anytime you're GPL is another example. We could go, the list can be on and on and on and on. Anything that comes out in that budget, basically, okay, which is everything. The reality is, if they control the money for that, then they are responsible for whatever is taking place or not taking place. Okay? Because that little bit of control is where all the pros and cons lie. I don't know how else to put that.
You see it in every so-called business or every organization that is supposed to be autonomous but is really controlled by the government.
Right.
So
Right.
Gaisuko, for example, there's been something in the news recently about the projected income of Gaisuko and how well it's doing, how much sugar it's going to produce.
Yeah.
And apparently it is again underperforming and not even reaching the very limited target that it set. A complaint was made in the newspaper by someone who obviously knows what they're talking about, that the cane is being left in the field too long, and in this rain, it's going to go bad, and therefore the sugar content will not be high. And that no one's talking about it. But the problem is that the management in Gaisuko, the directors in Gaisuko, are appointed by and are answerable to the government. So the Ministry of Agriculture is going to ignore it and stay quiet when things are bad, and then is going to trumpet when they provide this funding to Gaisuko or buy this equipment or that kind of thing. But all of that goes back to them holding the purse strings and putting money into an institution that's failing. And that institution should not just be self-supporting, it should be profitable, because the reality is sugar is what made the country of Guyana in the first place. So how is it that the entire infrastructure that we see was paid for by sugar for the last 100 years up to the 1970s, and then suddenly we turn around, put government in charge of it, and now we have to subsidize it year after year after year? It can't work.
I just want to go much more large. Again, I need people to think a little bit bigger to understand how big the problem is. How is it also that the price on the world market for sugar has gone up since the 70s, 80s? And then more importantly, the demand for it has gone up. So how can both of those things have gone up, yet our industry here, which is a foundation to our society, has not adapted, has not kept up?
Now compare it to rice, which is privately owned.
Correct.
Privately milled.
Yeah.
And production of rice is going up.
Yeah.
Now, rice has its own problems because in those areas that are controlled by government, there is always politics. So in the allocation of land, taking back leases from people, trying to take grants back from
millers, absolutely.
Not having a system for maintaining the same drains that we're talking about.
Yes.
But despite all of those difficulties that are government related, that are related to politics,
it's finding its way through.
Because it's privately owned, those boys are pinching their pennies, managing their business, and you're seeing growth.
Yeah.
Not enough growth, but growth. So compare rice to sugar and draw the conclusion.
Yes. Compare any private organization to any, I say this all the time, show me one successful government-run organization. Show me one. I beg people to do this all the time. Just give me one government, a state institute, state organization that is run successfully, and I can't figure it out to this
So
day.
bauxite has gone through mountains and valleys
Mm-hmm.
because bauxite was privately owned,
Mm-hmm.
and then it was nationalized by Burnham and started to go downhill. And then the private folk came in, and you saw improvement again.
Yes.
You know, it's not difficult.
No.
But as long as the government folk insist on keeping control, holding the purse strings, and not allowing the capitalist system to work, allowing businessmen to operate their business on a level playing field of taxation, a level playing field that they can compete openly and transparently, we are going to continue to have problems.
Correct. Okay, we're actually going to switch topics here into something I think is on every single Guyanese mind right now. Okay, and rightfully so. It's something that we all are worried about, and it's something that I think, again, needs to be discussed as openly and frankly as possible, so that the right strategies could come in. And I'm hoping that, the government and everybody else are between a rock and a hard place. We completely agree. But I think the citizens themselves are looking for some sort of comfort. The questions keep arising. Again, it always boils down from a lack of trust. But people are worried about what's happening on the border with Venezuela right now. All right. The military has come out with a few statements recently, in which they said they've come under fire. And then we heard about the elections that are upcoming. The military has made some very bold statements with regards to Venezuelan nationals here participating in those elections. People will be deported. There was a statement that was made today that people will be any Venezuelan that participates, any Venezuelan or Guyanese for that matter. I don't know how they're going to deal with the Guyanese, but that participates in that Venezuelan election for Essequibo will be deported, or if Guyanese, I guess, punished somehow. As was mentioned by the chief of the military, is that it's highly illegal. I don't know if it's treason. I'm not sure what the law is that would fall under, but understandably why the statements were made. And then another very interesting comment from the military, from the chief of staff from the military, was that basically we are all soldiers. He said, if we end up in trouble, they're going to call on all Guyanese. And it's just been some interesting statements coming out. And then we'll get into the politics in a bit, but just based on just what your observations have been on this Venezuela Essequibo situation, what's your take on it?
Memories are short, because when this first came up, everyone was very bothered and very flustered, and then it seemed to have gone away with the ICJ ruling and interim orders and that kind of thing, and we promptly forgot about it, and we see people having parties and all of that. I want to say this, though, that at the outset, although they started off slowly, I think the government got their act together and did everything that they could do. They galvanized the CARICOM organization, other international organizations. They spoke to the Americans. They pushed in the ICJ. They pushed their case. Now, people say, it needs to be a strong answer to Venezuela and that kind of thing. Nonsense. There is nothing we can do militarily against Venezuela. So when I hear the GDF talking about that, I just smile and say, good luck. Somebody's living a dream. The government has really done its best to push our case using international channels,
Diplomatic channels,
and using the international court structure that exists. And I really think they've done well. They also were inclusive. They brought in Carl Greenwich and some other experts. So it was a joint
they actually allowed the
effort.
transition to continue because it was happening under Granger's time.
It was a joint effort, and it was well done.
Yeah.
And I can't really think of anything more. If you were to say to me, take charge, what would you do? I can't think of anything more that I would do. A problem I have is that it does need to be kept on the minds of the people. We need to be updated and we need to be informed. That's first thing. And the second thing is it should never be politicized. And I was disappointed to see Norton's statement saying that the opposition is not cooperating with the government because they're terrible people. So although Venezuela is evil, the government is bad.
It's not going to be politics if you allow this to happen.
That's a non-statement.
Yeah,
and it got
agreed.
exactly the answer it deserved, which is no answer. I don't think anybody took him seriously or took the statement seriously.
Yeah.
You can't play politics with something like this. And worse yet, I didn't see a single suggestion that he made that was meaningful in terms of what could be done that hadn't been done. I would like to invite the opposition, if they have suggestions, we are all Guyanese for the good of the country. Put those suggestions forward so that we can be in a better place, because we're all in the same boat when it comes to Venezuela. But no posturing. Come on, no empty statements that just raise political hackles and don't do anything else. That doesn't help.
All right. We want to touch on two things here.
Sorry, Ken, you'd asked me about the elections. So
yeah, go ahead, please go.
We kind of think about obscure things like that, intangibles, without analyzing the nitty-gritty day-to-day chores that would be involved in holding an elections. We've all done elections. We've all seen elections. You got to have places of poll. You got to have ballot papers. You got to have a list of the electorate. You got to do the publications. There have to be people present, election people present who are monitoring the process. That would be very difficult to do in Essequibo, in a foreign language, without the whole country knowing. I really don't see, beyond the saber rattling that the Venezuelans are doing, there got to be an election, that there's going to be places of poll in Anna Regina and Charity and everywhere else in Essequibo, so that a registered list of voters can turn up and put X's on ballot papers. I think that's a far-fetched scenario, but let's see how that goes.
I'm going to touch on two things, but one is I will state that something obviously interesting is happening. For what you just said, which is absolutely correct, that nobody can secretly hold the election. All right, you will know what is occurring. But then for the head of the military to come out and say that if anybody participates, they will be arrested. So I kind of went, so then there is an election happening. You know what I mean? And that kind of struck me as I would like more information on it.
I didn't hear him say that, but if he said that,
absolutely. It's in the news today.
I'm curious to know how the GDF is involved in law enforcement and arrests.
Yes.
Again, we have systems, and I do know I see a lot of GDF vehicles running around the place with sirens on and that kind of thing, which again they should not be doing. But I don't believe they're police yet, unless measures are taken. So I don't think that the power of arrest, the decision as to what crime has been committed and that kind of thing, really falls within their remit at this stage. So let's wait and see.
That's one thing. Good. We need more information on that. That's what we need.
We need more information.
Right. But the next part of this is something I think all Guyanese need to have the conversation about. Is I know you kind of brush over it because you, like myself, assume that it's kind of common sense. But you get a lot of conversation now, and a lot of people will disagree with this, but I think you need to understand a little bit more. Is as to why investing in guns and tanks and planes and stuff like that can and will never be the solution. All right, and you guys need to wrap your head around what beefing up the military means. All right, one, as much as we have plenty money, we don't have beefing up the military to Venezuela extent money. And to be very honest with you, I don't think we ever will.
No, we never will.
Right? We never will. And again, just on the pure basis of numbers, on logistics, we don't have the people, right? So
for every plane, you need a pilot, you need an engineer, you need a co-pilot, you need support staff,
right?
You need a runway.
Right.
Now, I don't know where all of these things come from.
We can get maybe about 15 planes.
Well, where you putting them? What runway you putting them
that
on?
is a problem too. Yeah, I hear you. I hear you.
So it's impossible.
Right. So they need to understand that side, right? They need to understand that financially, logistically, I'm sorry, guys, but the truth is we will never be able to build our military to anything that will ever be able to compete with Venezuela's. It's impossible. Okay, you need to get out of here. I know a lot of you sit down and I need to break the conversation down as much as possible. A lot of them sit down there and say, yeah, but we can buy drones and we can do this and we can make our military smart and we can do these things. And I'm not sitting there saying I'm a military expert. But again, I think we're asking for something that's impossible. All right, we know that that's not possible. We know that even just something as simple as understanding, like to buy that type of equipment that we keep watching on American television that they use, we're not even allowed to buy it. It's why the rest of the world doesn't have it. Only certain countries like Russia, China, and America. You know what I mean? So I think people, they're not even understanding the whole process of building a military. It's not even something that you get to choose to do. The world has to participate in that decision, right? So that's one side of it. Again, though, just one more time, putting money into our military is a waste. We will send people to that border looking nice in nice uniforms with new fancy guns, and they will die. Okay, we can't fight. It sounds like we shouldn't even be saying this. I know it's not even a nice thing to say because it worries people.
It's not even worth a conversation. I wouldn't even go further.
Good.
Than that. I do believe the government has done everything that they can. They need to keep it on the front burner, and
Yes.
they need to keep agitating with the international community,
Good.
the international organizations, and they need to keep the people, the citizens of Guyana informed and updated.
Yes.
In an intelligent way. Now it's sound bites, not with empty, yes, you could belong to Guyana kind of thing, but with intelligent information that we can analyze and
Yes, and make decisions on ourselves as well. It has every citizen's well-being involved in this. I mean, we all live in this country, and if something happens there, it will affect all of us horrendously. And so we need to be aware of it, and we need to make decisions again for ourselves. But again, just so you understand the solution, now that I've said it, is again, Tim just touched it again. The idea is what the government is doing is international collaboration, right? It's how it works, whether it be with Brazil, whether it be with England, whether it be with America, but it has to be somebody, the reality is, that can defend us against Venezuela. And I think that's where the conversation needs to be had around. You know, I sorry to say this, but again, I'll talk as from my opinion. CARICOM and the Caribbean islands could only do so much, right? It's not even as much, and let's be very honest, everybody out here. We all realize how many countries didn't sign the last document stating that Venezuela should stop what they're doing, right? There's certain, honestly, I can't even remember the countries, but I know Trinidad and a couple of the islands didn't sign it, right?
a lot of them stayed neutral.
A lot of them.
And there's a pull factor. Look, here's the truth. At the international level, nobody looks for truth. People look for self-interest.
Yes.
So unless you have some kind of leverage that you can make a promise and offer a carrot or threaten somebody with a stick, countries look after self-interest. And the fact is, Venezuela, with all the sanctions, can offer more than Guyana can offer.
Yes.
So there are historical alliances, us in the Caribbean, and we have been able to maintain a lot of that. There are other interests like the Americans who do not want to see a spread of Venezuela, the Brazilians who would oppose Venezuelan expansion.
They just want peace in the area. Correct.
And the other South American countries, yes, just want peace. But everyone is looking after self-interest. And this is not some church where choir boys are singing. This is self-interest. And we need to approach it and approach our discussions with the foreigners, with the organizations, understanding that and seeing what can be done to secure our position and what we can offer.
Yeah. No, yeah, absolutely. And I think that's where the conversation needs to be centered around. Again, the government, this is not a political conversation. The government is between a rock and a hard place here.
Definitely.
All right. And again, as Tim said, all that can happen now is more collaboration with international partners. Obviously, negotiation for some sort of protection or conversation in which peace can be kept. And then again, other than that, all they can do is inform us of what's going on. But we have to be very understanding and realistic as to what our limits are in Guyana, as Guyana. So I don't think there's too much more to talk about that. I mean, I think people are online listening, but I don't,
I don't think there's much more to be said about Venezuela.
It's a hard.
The status quo remains. Hopefully we get a final decision from the ICJ.
Yes.
That will give us some strength. Hopefully we can forge more firm alliances with the Americans and the Brazilians, who are the ones that are most interested, and I also think most dependable, most
Yes.
predictable. I'd like to see an American military base somewhere in
That's an interesting
in,
conversation.
Essequibo.
But people got a lot of hang-ups with that,
Of
just so
course
you
they
know.
do, because there's national pride and sovereignty and all that kind of thing.
Why not a Brazilian military
But
base
there
then?
are bases in Turkey, in Germany, in Cuba. There are bases all over the place. There is no reason not to understand that those bases have their own economics, because the families come in, they need food, they need supplies, they create their own infrastructure. Any village or town that is near to a military base immediately becomes extremely prosperous. And if it's placed in a sensible geographic place, it could expand to become a customs import place. It could become an economic hub. It can only help the economy, and it provides the stability
It
that
provides
no
stability.
foreigner come in to mess with the military base. Right now, there's bush there. It's jungle. Why not?
I like the conversation. I do think it's something that obviously should be discussed. I do believe, though, again, that there's a lot more that comes with, well, if that is being done, one, what are the benefits for America? But two, what else is being required of us?
Of course.
You know what I mean?
Of course,
So,
and we don't have the knowledge.
yeah.
But certainly, if you're angling for stability, for security against Venezuela, and for somebody who you know will have your back and will help, it is something to explore.
Boots
to
on the
see
ground
what
is
there.
critical.
Yes.
Yeah. But and again, like I just mentioned, it doesn't always have to be an American base either. Though. It can easily be a Brazilian base, right? I do believe that themselves have, funny enough, more stake or would be more interested in having a stake in stability for Guyana.
If they have the appetite
Yeah.
for that kind
We
of
understand
thing.
the
But I
oil,
simply-
we understand
I
the
simply
money.
don't know.
Yeah.
One of the interesting factors I found, and it's something that's an open secret, really. We know that the largest source of drugs, cocaine, is Colombia. And we do know that when Venezuela is not doing well, so when their systems are failing, it is very easy for drugs to traverse Venezuela. And that's why Guyana is seen as such a large transshipment point. So it comes across Venezuela, reaches to Guyana, and we have a drug trade that is an open secret. That is part of what can be managed if there was a presence in the Essequibo with the kind of monitoring and the kind of equipment that can look at aircraft flying overhead and look at boats going through the river and that kind of thing. So there are things to talk about, that it will improve the response to that kind of crime. It will improve the response to the gangs that the GDF can't seem to cope with. And it will help the stability in the area overall and in the region if it can contribute to the fight against drugs. So there's a lot to look at.
Yeah.
It can't be done in one conversation with two
Yes,
men,
exactly. Correct.
men of the pen who don't know anything.
Correct. All right. We're gonna switch the conversation now to another interesting topic that has been taking over the airwaves, and that is the current ongoing court matter between GRA and the Mohammeds. All right, over there they have some luxury vehicles that GRA has now produced documents for, stating that they were undervalued while brought in. All right, and the correct duties, correct taxes were not paid on these vehicles. And he's been charged for I don't think it was fraud or something along those lines, in which he had to go in front of the magistrate yesterday. And it just brought up and has raised a lot of questions. One, I'm going to be very honest to start here. I know this. I personally don't view it as a pressing national issue. I know it has its political, connections, and which is why obviously it's being looked at as much as it is, because we've seen lots of cases with GRA and people bring in vehicles before. Paying right taxes, paying wrong taxes, etc. But this one obviously has a lot more teeth to it, if you will, because, well, we understand, Mohammeds with their philanthropy, etc., political commentary, but also the scale of it. I mean, it's hundreds of millions of dollars we're talking about. Somebody that has blatantly, kind of had his, shown his luxury, shown his wealth. All right. And especially in a country with this kind of poverty, and then only to hear, well, he's brought in those things through means.
But I only know.
But bear in mind, those vehicles came in 2021, I think.
So why only know?
Correct. Correct. And that, I think, is where the conversation is kind of heading towards. But I think before we get there, the conversation needs to be had. I have to make this statement just to throw another stick in this thing. In the news, the government news, by the way, because any type of this information I get from government news, okay? Your newsroom, your DPI, your Chronicle, your NCN, wherever. It is said that the U.S. State Department gave, or Justice Department, one of the two, the U.S. government gave GRA the correct invoices of what Mohammed's vehicles were worth. All right, so the government of America gave this to GRA, all right, through their own channels. Now, obviously, the first conversation needs to be had of, well, obviously, Mohammed's didn't walk in and say, well, here's my invoice, whether you like it or not, I take in my vehicle. That didn't happen. Somebody had to give it to him and approve it up top, right? And then, secondly, I have to make this comment because it's something that I've noticed a lot of the younger people kind of have been talking about, and it's an opinion piece, but it has its political side of it. It's just interesting that a lot of us have seen the government utilize American resources to go after Mohammeds like they have here, but are not willing to, for example, use those same resources, as we've listened to the American ambassador's conversation, in which interview maybe a couple of days ago, in which she said, no request has been made by the government of Guyana to help with the investigation with the Adriana Young murder or investigation or matter. So I'm sorry. I'm one of those people that do find that you got enough time and energy and political will to go after the Mohammeds and ask the government for help, of American government for help, but not in these other scenarios. And they keep running independent. Even the Canadian investigator is independent. It's not through the Canadian government, right? He's a retired investigator. Not that he's not capable. I'm not questioning him. I'm just saying, why not have Scotland Yard or some sort, FBI or some organization that is active help and be involved? Or at least show us that you've requested it and they've denied it. So these conversations, I think, is what needs to happen, which is where the political side of the conversation comes in. But nonetheless, let's start on the fact that how exactly has Mohammed's been able to pay what they did to release these vehicles, and how did this occur? Tell me about the corruption.
Well, don't let's say corruption. The systems of bringing any item, including a car, is that you first of all, you declare the value, and the value is the amount you paid for it. So you produce the receipt that you were given, or evidence of the payment you made to buy the item, the vehicle, and tax is calculated as a percentage of that value. Okay. Now, of course, the first temptation is going to declare an undervalue. So to manufacture some receipts. So if you paid $20 million for the car, you want to show that you paid $5 million for the car. So part of the process is for the GRA, when they receive your application to bring in this car and they see what you're declaring, to do their own background work to see if this is a reasonable value for that vehicle. They don't accept your receipt just blindly. They're supposed to ensure that the declared value is a realistic value. Now, when they exercise their discretion and they either take their realistic value or your declared value, and they do their maths and they tell you how much tax you got to pay and you pay your tax, you collect your car. After that, it is really only if they discover some kind of fraud that they're entitled to go back and revisit their exercise of discretion. Because remember, they haven't blindly relied on your declaration. They are obligated as part of their process to make sure this is a realistic value. Now, you say, we asked Americans for an invoice. I got a problem with that. I would be very surprised if any U.S. agency traced and produced an invoice for this particular car. Okay? I rather suspect that what happened is there is a general valuation for this kind of car. But anybody can go online and do it. So I don't know why you needed that specialized information. Maybe they got the specific invoice. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. But if they got the specific invoice, why no? That's the problem I have, you see. Because what's happened is you go and seize the car. Did you have the invoice when you went to seize the car, or did you get it after? If you got it after, then what information did you have when you go to seize the car?
Right, correct.
You go to seize the car with no information? Did you have new information? Is it that when the car came in, you didn't go online like anybody can do and see what the average value of this kind of vehicle is?
We all did it when it came in, just so you know. We all know what the value of the car was, except GRA apparently.
Except the person who signed the customs form.
There you go.
So a lot of questions come up, and it goes back to me to a larger picture, which is that there was a time when this family was very close to the PPP and were in good graces. There was a gold export license enjoyed by this family. There was a Cambio license enjoyed by this family.
When the president was sworn in, he was driving their vehicle. He was using their vehicle.
So there was a time they were close. And then the US made an announcement, and suddenly they found themselves on an island all by themselves, abandoned. They were stranded. I believe that we are going to see a declaration from the family that they are going into politics. And I think the whole of Guyana knows. This is a secret. I think like I got some special knowledge. It's not that. The whole of Guyana knows that the PPP likely see that as an even bigger threat than the PNC or anybody else. Because if the Mohammeds, after they have been doing their, all right, let's call it philanthropic works, have been giving to the poor and that kind of thing, if they go into politics and declare that they're running for the elections, the voters that will support the Mohammeds are not just PNC type voters. And it is very possible that if they take 10 or 15,000 voters away from the PPP, and remember, it's the grassroots voters who find them attractive. It's the grassroots voters who are glad for the handout, who are glad for the help. And it's the grassroots supporters who blindly vote PPP. If they take 10 or 15,000 votes away from the PPP, they take away a PPP majority. I think that is a very scary thought for the PPP.
Right.
And if it happens, there will be hell to pay in the country, because we will have the independent parliament that we've been talking about for the longest while. The way to prevent that is to prevent these people from ever reaching the stage where they are contesting the elections. So to do everything to pull them down. You see the social media, you see the hidden media, you see the attacks through the government agencies to try to tie these people or put them on the back foot to such an extent that they have to hold up a white flag and beg for mercy. I don't know if that's going to work. I don't know if these folk are going to get to an election, but I really do believe that their plan is to declare for an election. And we have to wait and see. I haven't spoken to any of them. I am just observing like you're observing, reading the papers, looking at social media and seeing what's happening. But I do know that if they run, the greatest threat will be to the PPP and their majority, because they will be taking votes from both sides.
Yeah. I do want to make that comment as well. I think it's something valuable to add to the conversation that, the conversation obviously comes up at that point. If, at least the fence sitters, if not the PPP, then who? Who else is capable of running the country? And I'd like to make something as clear as possible. Not within the next, 3, 4, 5 elections are we going to see a president of Guyana outside of the PPP and the PNC. All right. When you look at the numbers, the reality is they have a stranglehold on 90% of this population.
Since independence.
Yeah, since independence. So until those people start dying out, and they're doing a good job, bear in mind, they're also doing a good job of, one, indoctrinating some of the young into making sure that they stay loyal to those parties. And then two, and this is more important because it's something that I think all of us have picked up on and taken note of over the last couple of weeks, is they've done a good job in ensuring that they're entrenching the racial division in the country. You watch the comments, you watch the trolls come out on both sides. Okay, let's make that clear. This is now Afro-Guyanese versus Indo-Guyanese once again. And the young people, at least the educated, at least those free thinkers, need to understand that that is what is happening. All these two parties are doing are shoring up their bases, all right, and then trying to get as much new people on board to say, you need to stick with your race. Now, why that's important to have the conversation about, again, is no matter who the next player is, no matter who the third party that's coming in is, you are not looking at that person running the country. So that fear doesn't need to be there. It's not, oh my gosh, Mohammed's is a gold smuggler or whatever the allegations are, or tax evader, and he's a bad person. He could never run the country. The reality is he will not be running the country. Okay, the executive will stay with the PPP or the PNC. So what we're trying to create, as Tim explained to you there, something we talk about every show, is understanding what a minority government is ensuring that there's a balance, is that ensuring in Parliament that there is somebody in the middle that forces whoever is in government to consult with everyone else. They can't just make decisions on their own, because clearly what we're seeing right now is a party. We saw it with APNU, and now we're watching it with PPP, that whenever they're left to just make decisions on their own, they get power drunk, all right? They make decisions that help their friends and their family. Corruption is rampant. Industries and systems fall, all right? And are left to waste. And we're watching all the effects of winner-take-all politics, which is why it's so important to create a minority now, all right? And that is the basis now of changing the laws, which happens in Parliament, changing the rules of the game, changing the way the country is governed under the laws to ensure, one, we depoliticize the important stuff, and then two, a word I used earlier before we came on here, is to digitize things, which is creating accountability, all right? That's my new slogan, I guess. I'm going to start, coining it. D and D, all right? Depoliticize and digitize. That is how you fix 90% of the systems in the country. All right, something that is affecting all of us daily. The police, for example. The police commissioner is a politically appointed position who is only accountable to the president at this point in time. Again, that means he's a political entity. And then the problem again is there's no traceability. There's no paper trail. So if you digitize everything, all of a sudden accountability is a must. You get to see who logging into the system. You get to see who's doing what. You get to see which gun license has been applied for, blah, blah, blah. All right, which investigation, the updates, everything's put into a system, communication, it all is digitized. So depoliticize everything and digitize it. All right. And that happens in Parliament. So, for example, a minority government can force something like that to occur, which is why it's so critical at this stage in Guyana's life, especially with our newfound wealth, that we must ensure that all this power is no longer in one person's hands or one party.
We talked about some of the examples of government-owned entities not working. And it is in the context of the government having the purse strings and being able to plow money into these entities that are failing. Mm-hmm. If the opposition controlled Parliament, there would suddenly be no more money available freely for Gaisuko. Mm-hmm. What it would do, it would force the government to sit down with the opposition and come up with a meaningful way to privatize the institution sensibly, keeping in mind the needs of its employees, the needs of the country as a whole, the fact that Gaisuko maintains drains, for example. Mm-hmm. So ensuring that the privatization process continues to have drain maintenance, continues to cater for the needs of those villagers who still depend on Gaisuko, mm-hmm. but privatize it in a way that turns it into a profitable entity. Yeah. Now, if the opposition tie the Parliament's purse strings and say no more money for Gaisuko, it would force government to come and sit down. At long last, you'd have one Guyana because both sides would be having the discussion. Mm-hmm. What we had is government plowing money into a failed commercial entity. And then when the government changed in 2015, the PNC government decided they're selling it and firing everybody. Mm-hmm. Equally disastrous. And then the government putting it back together piecemeal after 2020. Yeah. Totally ridiculous. The only way to solve that problem is for both sides to sit down and come up with a feasible, sound financial plan. And a majority opposition in Parliament can force that to happen by saying, we are not authorizing any more money for Gaisuko until we sit down and have this discussion. Yeah. Same thing with GPL. Same thing with Mayor and City Council. An opposition parliament can immediately say to the chief valuation officer, we are allocating a budget, go and do your job, value these properties, so that suddenly the NDCs can get rates and taxes from all those new housing areas. Mayor and City Council can get rates and taxes commensurate with these enormous buildings that are going up and become financially autonomous so that they can start awarding their own contracts to build roads, fix drains, and suddenly there's a decentralization of power and things will work.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. We got a few minutes more, and I want to talk about one last thing. Tim, plenty people is tuned into this show. Okay, last week's show and the week before that, I think we had almost 70,000 to 80,000 people on each show.
Wow!
Right, right. Just understand the size of the numbers. Enough people that it can make a difference in the country. And I want to have a conversation that I think is affecting thousands and thousands of them. And I know it's kind of dumbs down to what we were just speaking about. But Tim, something has to be done about the traffic situation in this country. People, and I mean this in the most literal way, people are suffering, okay? People are not getting time with their families. People are not, being as productive at work as they can be. Rain falls, everything goes to even more hell. All the new roads, even down to the Heroes Highway now is backed up on traffic. And they ain't even start throwing the traffic from the bridge onto that yet. So we need some, is there no city planning? Are these roads like just stuck and left, putting us in worse situations? Let's please even include the importation of vehicles into this conversation. The fact that I personally think it's hard to restrict and tell people that you can't buy a car, but something has to be done. I do have a solution to start, but please,
let me hear you, because I have some ideas, but I don't have short-term ideas. One thing I'll tell you, I think the police are really trying their best. Every morning, every evening, I see the police out there.
I agree with you.
Directing traffic.
It's hard.
It is a tough,
it's hard.
thankless job. It is a horrible job, and every day they're out there and they're really doing it, and I gotta compliment them for it.
Good. Okay, let me give you my solution right off the bat, Tim. It's how, again, Kian is not reinventing the wheel here. So please, this is not, that'll never work or that's a bad idea. I'm just telling you what has worked around the world. You have to ensure your public transit system is something that people can rely on. That's something people can use. Okay, right off the bat, thousands of people in any city around the world that you go to, this. Do I need to explain this? Do I need to explain that we need a proper bus system, a proper train system? We want to explain.
That's vague to say proper. And I think maybe if we look at the very real examples and what people want, because it's hard for me to come out of my house and look at my car and say, I'm not going to drive, I'm going in a minibus. The reason for that is a minibus is a choked, cramped, uncomfortable place. You don't know what time it's coming, but chances are the driver is going to be driving recklessly and it's going to be overcrowded and uncomfortable.
Right. So the problem is this.
Public transportation needs to be reliable, it needs to be punctual, it needs to be safe, and it needs to be dignified. You got to be able to sit down comfortably, and that mode of transportation actually has to be preferable to driving. London is a good example. In London, I promise you, it is better to take a bus or to go in the underground than to drive a car.
Yes.
And you will see, I invite you to go on YouTube, watch TV. You will see doctors and nurses and lawyers sitting down in public transportation, very comfortable.
People who have cars that are choosing to use the train. Yeah.
And that solves a huge amount of problems. Yes. I agree that that's one of the main central solutions.
Yes.
We're not going to get there.
You can't say we're not going to get there. This is not rocket science. Okay? I know we have to go now, but this is not rocket science.
We could devote a whole program for that, because that needs an hour.
It does. It's a good conversation, because, guys, one of the biggest issues in this country is obviously deaths on the road, is obviously traffic, is infrastructure issues, blah, blah, blah. Even down to the old vehicles that come, safety issues, but even down to environmental issues. There's lots of stuff in which the world has already in the process of resolving, that we are very fortunate to be as young as we are, that we can implement things now that are easy to implement, that the whole world has had to struggle with already, that are 100 times bigger than we are.
One of the good things about us is the small population.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right, guys, on that note, we will be back to talk about public transportation on another show. Guys, thank you for joining us. We will be back next week. Please be safe on the roadways. As usual, every day we're seeing it, too many accidents. And other than that, yeah, I will stick to for the week. I think it's important to say again. Funny enough, it's on my mind because I just got stopped by a police, and it was quite a nice interaction actually. All right, and I will say that I think we need to give. At least there are some police out there that are trying, and I know a lot of people get frustrated and they tend to take it out on them sometimes, especially with the mess in society right now in general.
Courtesy cuts two ways, and I have had very good interactions with police, but I do know that they are on a hair trigger because they expect you to tell them some foolishness.
Yes,
but if you're polite, you can expect them to be polite.
I found it.
And I really would recommend that.
Yes.
Don't have attitude.
Correct. There you go. Guys, on that note, thank you for joining us. We'll be